Hi, guys. This is the very first episode of the podcast series Let's Talk by MindSpa. My name is Vandana Sudhir, and I am a clinical psychologist. You can always reach out to us at www.mindspa.org, where we put your problems above your identity. So, before we launch the series, I thought the perfect intro topic should be a conversation about mental health stigma. And I know it sounds like a very basic topic, but I had to because believe it or not, it's actually pretty believable, unfortunately, but this is still a thing in 2021. I know we've been talking about mental health a lot more now than we ever did before, but it still isn't enough. Mental health disorders remains as one of the largest hidden disease burdens in India, especially in the South. Research has found that depression and suicide death rates were higher in urban areas in comparison to less developed ones. And this is odd, because usually we hear that urban development has always benefited the medical field in terms of access to treatment and care. But this is just not the case when it comes to mental health. In regards to mental health, there's almost an inverse effect, and it's simply because of stigma and discrimination. And that is why we need to talk about it. According to the World Health Organization, 1 in 5 people will suffer from a mental illness at some point of their life. And by mental illness, I'm not talking about problems of daily living. I'm talking about depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, intellectual disturbances, learning difficulties, ADHD, addictions, etc., that all affect the same areas of the brain, just in very different levels. And this is not a small statistic. 1 in 5? Technically, everyone should know someone who suffers from a mental illness then. And the fact that we don't, or we think we don't, is not because the problem doesn't exist. It's because of 3 main reasons. There is a lack of understanding when it comes to mental illness. People are just reluctant to admit it. And finally, mental illness is highly stigmatized. Now, stigma is a word we use to refer to something that is very shameful or disgraceful. Why is something so natural as a mental illness stigmatized? Trust me, we all have these assumptions, and let me prove this to you in a second. Imagine you're invited to an important event and you just don't feel up for it. Would you rather call and tell them you have food poisoning instead of telling them you're depressed or suicidal? What would make you feel more uncomfortable? Showing your prescription for diabetes or the medication you use to treat your substance addictions? If you prefer the former to the latter, then you're affected by stigma. Development had an effect on mental health in India because the concept of family, that was the most crucial social support system that we knew of here. And urbanization changed that. It caused people to transition from huge joint families to small nuclear settings. And though this had an impact on everyone, women were still largely affected. And this is because the predominant role of married women is to still function as a housewife in large parts of India. And of course, I know this trend is changing, but still, being a homemaker limits Indian women's interaction outside of family settings. And so they never had a support system, unlike men who got that from their workplaces. Stigma encourages people to remain quiet, and they kind of maintain the secrecy about mental illness. We have the means, yet people on average suffer from approximately 7 years with depression before they even think of asking for help. Delayed help-seeking behaviors and reluctance to make use of the mental health services also encourages state to not invest resources into mental health care. Kerala only has 1% of the national health budget that is allocated to mental health care, and most other states don't even have separate funds allocated to mental health. So now we are stuck in a very vicious cycle. And the first step to break it is to eliminate stigma. And now this is where you guys come in. What can you do to help? First, it is to simply recognize mental illness for what it is. It is a medical condition that can be treated. It is an illness like any other part of the body. Our brain too is an organ. The main way to do this is just by being careful of the words that you use. Do not address someone who shows any symptoms as being crazy or attention-seeking, or just blame their parents for not raising them right. When we see someone in pain and they are choking, our instinct is to go ask them for help, right? But why do we never do this with someone who is acting emotionally strange or intoxicated? Normalize doing this. Be involved. Show your concern. Worst that can happen is they can ask you to go mind your own business. But it can also be the moment that can change your life. Second is to remove the assumption that mental illness is under a person's control. We always imagine people with mental illness as weak, lazy, violent, unmotivated to change their life. We tell them it's all in their head and they are arrogant and spoiled to have taken their life for granted. We don't ask someone in a wheelchair to just stand up, right? We never say it's just in your head so you can stand. Similarly, you cannot just tell someone who's having a panic attack to just snap out of it. Mental illnesses are real medical conditions, and we are a progressing industry trying to build effective treatments that must be made available to people. But really, sometimes it's not about medical knowledge or clinical skills. It's just about compassion. We can all show compassion to people, including those with mental illnesses. So if you don't know the right thing to say, the best you can do is to listen to them, non-judgmentally, support them, and encourage them to seek professional help. I ask that you find the heart and muster the will to reach out to someone in your life today, and I mean today, and just say, hey, let's talk. If you have any more further inquiries, you can always reach out to us at www.mindspa.org. We're always going to be there to help you guys out. Take care, guys.